as a pastor, like Christianity and all the quirky, dumb stuff we did, it kept my lights on. It allowed me to eat hot food and live indoors. And the problem with that is it's easier to compromise when your livelihood is attached to your faith.
Hello, welcome to Walk Like a Hebrew. I'm Jody Odell, and my goal is to share the testimonies of Christians who have had the scales fall from their eyes and have seen and understood the truth and relevance of the whole Bible as opposed to the last little bit of it we spent all our time in, in our previous places of worship. These stories are full of hope, wonder, and joy, as well as a little fear and sorrow as followers of Yeshua discover the actual meaning of his teachings, the Bible's incredible depth, and the true freedom that comes from obeying the Creator of the universe. Episode 37 is a little different from the usual format. During Sukkot this year at Safe Haven Farm in Orosi, California, I was introduced to two delightful couples who sat down to share with me as a group. So we'll hear from retired NBA player Jamal Sampson and his talented wife Angela, along with former megachurch youth leader Austin Sanford and his beautiful bride Susie. Just a heads up though, we recorded this interview in the middle of the camp with kids and families everywhere and a worship session in the background. We talk about Angela's initial resistance to change, how digging into the scriptures together strengthened Angela and Jamal's courtship, why Jamal really retired from the NBA, and how the Minister of Defense, Reggie White, sparked a life change of epic proportions. Susie Sanford talks about how her deep love for God led her to her marriage to Austin, and how her skepticism of this faith walk keeps her searching the scriptures. Then Austin regales us all with stories of how he got into ministry to prove he was a better Christian than his father, how once he found the truth, he banked everything on his faith in Yahweh, and how actually doing what the Bible teaches has changed their lives. We're here at Sukkot in Orosi, California, and I'm sitting down with Jamal and Angela Sampson and Austin and Susie Sanford. Thank you so much for sitting down and agreeing to tell me your story. So,
Absolutely.
Who wants to start? I want you to introduce yourselves first, and then I want to know, where were you before you came into the Torah walk? Where were you before, and how did you get here? Like, what was the thing? Most of us have like a thing that flips a switch, sure. And I want to know what that thing was.
Sure.
So,
well, I can start.
Okay.
My name is Angela Sampson. I'm married to Jamal Sampson. I grew up being half Egyptian, half Colombian. So my mother was raised Catholic, and then changed to become Coptic Orthodox by baptism, but really was involved in being non-denominational. And then my father was Coptic Orthodox. So my whole life, I'd go back and forth from being in a Coptic Orthodox church to a non-denominational church, Coptic, non-denominational, which created a lot of confusion for me. So probably by college, I really didn't care to have anything to do with God. I just wanted to live life, go to work, be successful. And it wasn't until the search, or I would say the yearning to want to know more, happened when I met my husband. So I met him at the time, a friend. I met him in 2013, and it was at that moment that my life completely flipped upside down. I mean, I would say now, 8 years later, in hindsight, it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, but at the time, it was something I didn't expect at all. So 2013, I meet my husband. I meet the man that I was going to marry. I didn't know that at the time. But we started hanging out, talking, getting to know each other better, hours on the phone. And then he asked me a question on the phone because I was living in Dallas at the time and he was in California. And he said, "Do you trust me?" And I said, "Yeah, I trust you." And he's like, "Okay, then come with me to a conference in Denver, Colorado." And I said, "Okay." So we went to the conference. I had no idea who the speaker was. I had no idea the background of the speaker, what I was getting myself involved in. I just knew it was a 3-day conference in Denver. And so we get there, and lo and behold, it was Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood.
Ooh, I just got chills. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and the emotions I remember feeling that Friday night was anger, because I couldn't believe that he had dragged me all the way from Texas to Denver to see this guy that I thought was crazy, really, when I started watching and listening to
Some
him.
people still think Michael Rood is crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I worked for him for 2 years down the line, but we could talk about that later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
But I remember that weekend I was just mad at my husband. I'm mad at Jamal, sorry. And I was like, why are you, what is this? Why are you bringing me here? What, you know, and I'm seeing the people dressing a lot different. I'm seeing people blow a shofar. I'd never seen that in my life, nor have I even read that. I'm hearing a man that is in a long white beard, a weird getup, you know, just yell and be very aggressive to a crowd of like 300-400 people. And I was like, this is not for me.
Oh, culture shock, huh?
Yeah, and so I would say it took about 9 months of me to finally come to the realization that this was going to be my truth, because there were so many things that I had questioned that others couldn't answer for me, the denominations that I was in. And it was really Jamal and I just on this search together, trying to figure it out, him more so than me. But I would ask questions, and he would, you know, pose a response, well, what do you think? Or let's look in the Bible together. And so it was us digging together. But I would say there was fighting and kicking for about a year, because I just wanted to hold on to my denomination and not be a part of this new thing that I had no idea what it was about. But it was one thing that I would say connected us and got us so close together. I mean, I'm talking 5-6 hours on the phone every night, just reading the Bible, learning and understanding truth together. So that was a very sweet part of our relationship early on. And then fast forward, we got married in 2015, postponed our honeymoon so that we could go to another Michael Rood event, a Passover event.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then it was at that time at Passover in 2015 where they had approached me to work for them.
Oh.
And so I worked with Michael Rood from 2015 to 2017. Great opportunity, just meeting a lot of people, learning more about truth. But I'd say the thing I enjoyed most is just connecting with people that were like-minded like me.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, that's my story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what about you, Jamal? How did you get here?
My name is Jamal Sampson, and the journey started for me when I was still actively playing. I was playing sports or whatever, and I was in the NBA, and I was playing for the Denver Nuggets at the time. And there was a famous football player by the name of Reggie White. And, yeah, Reggie had just passed away, and I remember I was at my house after practice one day, and they were running a special on ESPN regarding his death. And it was like a 5-minute quick snippet special on him. And during the special, they were talking about, because his nickname was the Minister of Defense. And so he was known for also being a Christian pastor since he was like 19. And what they said on the documentary was, in his waning years of his life, the last few years of his life, he had refused to pastor or to even go into a church. And so that kind of struck me, because I always knew him as the Minister of Defense, a guy who prayed with his team, led his team in prayer before games and stuff like that. Then they followed up to say that he had started celebrating the Sabbath, and he had, taken his time to move over to Israel to study Hebrew, and then he paid this large amount of money to go see the Dead Sea Scrolls and the vault they had in Israel and stuff like that. And so it just intrigued me, because they kept talking about how he started celebrating the Sabbath, and that stuck with me. And initially I didn't do anything about it, but it stayed with me in my subconscious. And so like a year or two went by, and I still had this inclination that I should look more into the Sabbath. I remember after it was right during the time I was about to retire, and something told me to look further into it. And so as I started looking further into the Sabbath, because I grew up Christian, Baptist, and had never even heard of the Sabbath in Scripture.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's crazy.
They never talked about it in church, and I never actually picked up the Bible and read it for myself. I just listened to what the pastor said, and it never came up in any sermon I had ever heard. So once I started looking into it, and I found a documentary Reggie had done that was like a 2-hour one with Nehemiah Gordon teaching them Hebrew.
Yep.
And so I watched that, and I heard his testimony for himself of how he came to learn that, there were the Hebrew roots of the faith and getting back to what Torah was and all this stuff. And it just resonated with me right then. And that kind of just propelled me to take off, like learning Torah, learning what the Sabbath was, how to implement the Sabbath. And then when you open the book and you actually see like how many times Old and New Testament that it talks about the Sabbath, you're like amazed, like, how did I grow up in church for this long and listen to so many pastors and never once hear them talk about the Sabbath, even though it's mentioned hundreds and thousands of times throughout
every
Scripture.
Page.
Yeah.
Literally almost every page.
Literally is.
Yeah.
And so at that point, like I'm a person, like I like the truth. I don't like to be lied to or whatever. So at that point, I just was digging and like I don't have a hard time. Like I'm a like dive in person. I don't do like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I just dove straight in. And like she said, when I took her to Michael Rood's for that first time, I said, "Do you trust me?" I had never been to a conference of his. I saw him teaching. Reggie White was on his platform, and I called her. I was like, "Do you trust me?" And it was both of our first time. Like I just dove straight in, and that just that was the start of my journey, and have been building since then. I ended up retiring from basketball, mainly because I wanted to follow the Scriptures. Like you can't do both. Like there's no way to fully implement this walk and play. Not just because of the Sabbath. I mean, that's a main part of it. Like sports and the Sabbath conflict because you have to play on the Sabbath, but also just the lifestyle. And so I end up having to walk away to pursue this walk. And that's the short version of how I got here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, now, do you guys, besides Michael Rood, I mean...
I watch a lot of different speakers.
Well, tell me who you like.
I love Arthur Bailey.
Arthur Bailey. Yeah. Yes, he was in the Way documentary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Isn't
that a great... Oh, my gosh. That was one of my inspirations.
Yeah. I mean, not only is he a close and good friend of ours, but I resonate well. I'm able to understand a lot of his teachings, and I enjoy listening to him. And I used to listen to Brad Scott, 119 Ministries. Mm-hmm. I really like Jim Staley as well.
Yeah.
I think even after his ministry in prison, he's just such a far better teacher, right? He went through that for a reason. So I really enjoy hearing his story and just kind of listening to his journey, while in prison and now out of prison.
Yeah. All right, Austin and Susie.
Yeah.
Tell me about where you were before and how you got here.
Yeah, so my name is Susie. I am Colombian, so was born in Colombia.
Wow.
And then moved to the U.S. when I was about 8 years old.
Okay.
My whole family's Catholic except for my dad. And so because of that, I grew up Christian. So even when I was little, I was always the different cousin amongst all my cousins because we did things a little different. And from a young age, my dad wouldn't let us celebrate Christmas and watch Disney Channel, and we just didn't do a lot of things. I didn't understand why. He just said, well, that's not from God. We can't do that. I was little. I was like 8, 9 years old, so my mom would always get upset, like, why are you teaching our daughters that? Like, you're depriving them from their childhood. Like, they should be celebrating Christmas and such. So, again, I complied, and my dad would just, hey, this is what we do. And when I got a little older, into my 20s, kind of just departed away from all of that and just did my own thing and was in the world, per se. Started celebrating Christmas again and all that. But I knew in the back of my mind, like, this isn't right. Like, I know better, right? So it wasn't until maybe 2016 that I had my first heartbreak that led me back into the church, right? So I started going to this church in Hollywood in Los Angeles called Mosaic, and it's cool. It's a cool church. It almost looks like a nightclub, and it attracts a lot of people who just kind of want to do like the cool Christian thing, They're not really diving in deep. It's all, grace and if you tithe, then your entertainment dreams are going to come true. And I was like, oh, this is so shallow. Like, I can't do this. So I had prayed. I was like, Lord, whoever it is that you have for me as a husband, I want them to be deep in the Word, and I want them to be solid in who you are so he could teach me and I could follow along. So I got on a dating app, met my husband, Austin.
Come on.
And
Come on.
yeah, it's Hinge to be exact. To be exact.
That Hingement.
So from the first day of speaking to him over FaceTime, we got on FaceTime the first day. We started talking, and then we talked till like 4 or 5 a.m. And I was like, this guy's different, Lord. Like, he's all about you, and this is what I've prayed for. This is it. And then Austin was like, hey, I don't mean to be too forward, but do you want to grab coffee the next day? So I said, yes, I don't drink coffee, but we can do boba. So we met up, and I was like, Lord, this is the one. You know, like the whole time we were sitting talking on our first date, we were just talking about God. And I was like, I've never had this in my life ever before. So fast forward to about a year later, we got married, prime COVID time, so everything was shut down. And Jamal and Angela actually married us at the beach. So, yeah, Jamal officiated the wedding, and it was just the four of us and our photographer. And at the time, still Christian, my husband was working at a church, and he actually quit working that week we got married. And people were, you know, what are you doing? My mom's like, why did Austin do that? You guys just got married. Like, COVID's crazy. There's no money, you know? And so we were just thinking, no, I feel like this is what, you know, the Father wants us to do. And then as we spent more time with Jamal and Angela, we would go over to their house often. And, you know, little by little, we'd hear more and more about, you know, Torah stuff. And at the beginning, I would tell Austin, like, hey, I don't like this. This is too Jewish. Like, I remember when I was like 14, I had met
Same. Oh my gosh.
I had met a lady that was a Messianic Jew. She actually rented from us when we lived in the house, and she would take me to like her little, I don't know what they call them, temples or
temple,
and they would keep services. The Shabbat, the Sabbath, and I'd help her set the table up, and I would go, and I'm like, this is too much. This is too Jewish. I don't like this, and I grew hatred towards it. And so when, you know, we started going more to Angela and Jamal's house, I was like, this is looking a lot like this Jewish stuff. And I'm not about this. And I remember we drive back home, and then I'm like, Austin, no. And he's like, but what do you mean? It's in the Word. And I'm like, I don't care. It's too Jewish. You know, little by little, like, he would show me where in Scripture it said such things. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, it does say that. So we come to our first Sukkot here, and even last night I'm telling him, I'm like, I don't know, this is like too much, you know, like it's still weird. And he's like,
Jews
and he's like, well, I mean, you haven't really, you know, dove in and like really studied this. And I was like, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just naive and not read his word and done it for my own. And so I told him last night, I was like, I think when we go back, we need to have a Bible study, and I just need to focus on just reading.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, so I was like, because if it says that's in there, then it's in there, you know? But I don't know that it's in there, and it still feels too Jewishy for me, but that's just my own lack of knowledge, like he called it. So that's where I'm at. Still discovering, still learning, and still a little skeptical. So
skepticism is healthy because it makes you want to dive deeper to find out for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if I could add, Jody, what I've appreciated about seeing Susie in this process, if you will, is the asking of questions. She doesn't just take it for what someone tells her. She asks and asks and asks to get to the root of understanding. And then when you're presenting her with that information and the truth, you know, she'll look at you and go, yeah, that's right. That, you know, so it just takes some time, which I can completely resonate with her on that.
Asking questions is the way to make it your own. Well, and you know, speaking of Jews, that's how rabbis teach. They ask questions. That's how you know, Yeshua and his disciples, most of their give and take would have been a question and answer type things. And often a disciple would ask a question, and instead of answering the question, he would ask another question back. That's a very rabbinic way of teaching, but it's very effective. Austin, your turn.
Yeah, so my story, I raised in a Christian household, but didn't really go to church. My dad actually still is a pastor, but I've only met my dad one time when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
So my dad was never in my life, and so from an early age, I got to see that you can put on forms of godliness. You can play church very well, but it doesn't mean you produce the fruit that the scripture talks about, right? Like anybody can make it look good. So much so that, I mean, demons can quote scripture, you know? So early on, like, it was easy for me to distinguish though. Like, my dad was different from the God of the Bible. Like, that was clear. But at the same time, it made ministry something I did not want to be a part of. I didn't want to get involved in the church because I'm like, no, I know what goes on in here. Like, I'm a bastard son. I'm the product I'm the product of what type of secrets are held in the church.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about it, I'm like, no, it's me. That's who I am. And I have a twin brother. So both of us were kind of, you know, ostracized and kind of kicked out of the congregation where my mom met my dad. And so he's still a pastor to this day. Not far, not in a different state, same county. And it's been like that my whole life. And so, but my grandmother, she was a woman of faith since I was young, and she always encouraged us to read the book. And in that, I would say she planted some seeds for me to follow. And so that kind of started my relationship process. I played a lot of basketball, so I didn't go to youth group. I wasn't in church every Sunday. I was out at tournaments and doing stuff like that. But she always impressed, like, keep reading the scriptures. And so my faith started to blossom in high school when I started my relationship with God. Started reading my Bible intentionally, started getting involved. Still in the world, but I'm interested in the scriptures. When I got to college is when the shift changed, and I realized, like, you know, this Bible thing is important. My relationship with God is important. And so I was willing to sacrifice playing basketball, living the college life to go full into church. And for me, I was like, I know I need to read this book, but every time I try to read it at home, like, I fall asleep. I don't know what's going on in Leviticus. So I was one of those people that was like, well, maybe if I put myself in the environment, don't give myself an option, because I do well if I don't have choices, then maybe I'll...
Isn't that funny?
I had to kind of trick myself and put myself in a bind. So I started volunteering in church like 40 hours a week, to the point where eventually they brought me on staff. And I knew that, like, at the very least, just being here will force me to read the word. And that's not true. Like, praying and reading the Bible is not part of the job description working in a church. You would think it is, but it's not. It's following ordinances and doctrines and
even
all
believing
that
in
stuff.
God isn't part of the job
No, it's not.
description in a lot of places.
In most places, yeah. There's, as long as you perform the work, we don't care where you're at, because, you know, He's the judge of our hearts. So moving forward, I've been working in the church for 5 years. I started at a small church doing youth ministry. I ended up at a large church, a very prominent church. I won't say the name, but you can probably guess. In the Orange County area, 13,000 people. I'm flying around the country talking to different pastors about how to implement discipleship. I feel like I got this Christianity church thing down. Like, I've devoted my life to it. I didn't go corporate. All I chased was Him from what I knew. But at the same time, I still held this small skepticism because of my dad. And like you just mentioned earlier, like, skepticism is good. It makes you question. So I felt like I was in there because I was like an undercover agent. And I'm like, I'm going to figure out where did all these denominations come from? Like, I'm going to get to the bottom of why is this so jacked up and so confusing? And so while I'm searching, I feel like I'm doing His will. I'm also in the back of my mind trying to figure out, where did everything go wrong? How did we split between Catholic, Christian, Mormon, Methodist, like Jehovah's Witness, Lutheran? So that felt like that was my internal mission. So what happened was, even working at this church, this huge mega church, we're doing things, and like I'm starting to feel even more of an urge to ask questions. I'm realizing, like, you know, everything we do in this church, it's based off of a meeting and goals. Like, nobody sits and prays, and nobody's willing to be, like, for the Father to tell them no. Like that's simply, if it's a good thing, it's a God thing. I'm learning that, like, you know, as I'm looking into things that we're showing kids, like Star Wars Day, I'm like, no, this has got a lot of Buddhism and Taoism infused in this. Or we're doing, you know, Harry Potter night. I did zombie nights with kids, and I'm like, man, he's really clear about necromancy and warlocks and witches. And I'm like, this is wicked. And so I'm conflicted, because the reason I'm in Christianity is because I'm trying to do this better than my dad did. I'm trying to show him up, is what I'm really here for. It's not about God. I'm trying to prove that, like, I'm the better version of you. And so in that, as I'm looking around, I'm like, oh, hold on, there's a problem here. Like, something's not lining up in what I'm teaching and in my heart. And so that kind of led me to notice all the discrepancies, because I'm like, I want to be held higher than my dad. I want to make sure I did it right, because he's obviously doing it wrong. So when I'm noticing these things, it makes me want to switch and turn. But it was still, like, the problem was, like, as a pastor, like, Christianity and all the quirky, dumb stuff we did, it kept my lights on. It allowed me to eat hot food and live indoors. And the problem with that is it's easier to compromise when your livelihood is attached to your faith.
Isn't that the truth? Wow.
It's scary. It's almost like, it's why, you know, Yeshua talks about money so much. Like, this is temptation. It's hard to stand up and do the right thing when you know you don't have a job lined up, and playing freeze tag isn't much of a work experience when you're trying to go get another job. You know what I'm saying? So you're kind of, you know, you're pigeonholed.
You're so right.
You're pigeonholed. You've walked yourself in. You got these handcuffs on you.
Yeah.
So
I never even thought of that.
but yeah, you can't cross over. What I'm gonna tell people I did.
Right?
What am I gonna say? I got nothing. And it's not even gonna make sense. And especially 9 times out of 10, if you're in the circle world, you're probably not even adhering to the scripture. So where the huge shift came, though, it came late 2019. So I started asking questions. I'm asking my coworkers, other prominent pastors, well known, and I'm like, as leaders and teachers, I keep going over that scripture. It talks about how we're going to be judged harshly, and it's freaking me out. You know what I'm saying? Because I want my dad to get grilled. I want him to get burned, crispy, extra crispy, double fried. So I'm like, he's for sure getting what he asked for. But at the same time, this applies to me too. Even though I walked into this with pride in my own ego, at the same time, like, I'm held to the same standard. I'm going to be held accountable for the same things. And so it's making me nervous, all the stuff that we're doing. And so I'm asking, I'm like, okay, maybe somebody can explain to me. If I get an explanation, if I get some knowledge behind it, this will make sense. And that was when the facade started to crack. I'm talking to pastors and nobody wants to answer my question. Now, I'm not a pew potato. I'm not, they call them CEOs, people that come to church for Christmas, Easter, and other. I'm not a random. I work here. I'm teaching. This isn't a random guy that came in off the street with some crazy views. I sit next to you. Why aren't you answering my questions? If he was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, why do we celebrate Good Friday? Easter is not in the book. What is the Christmas tree is not in there? Well, it is, but it's not a good thing. Obviously, no shepherds are shepherded in the wintertime. What's going on here? Who's this white guy on the wall? Like, I got so many questions. And nobody wanted to answer them. And so I got to a point where I was like, Father, I don't know where to look. I don't know what I don't know. And so I remember I was playing basketball with a friend. We were playing a tournament at Staples Center, just a friendly little Nike tournament. And somebody told me about my friend Jamal here. And they're like, well, yeah, he's in the book. And he's a little crazy. You know, he's a little weird. Like, he believes some stuff. He be asking some off-the-wall questions. And I was like, that's my guy.
A great thing to be known for.
I'm like, because I was playing basketball with these people, and I thought I was joining, like, a Christian team. And I'm like, oh, are you guys in Bible study? Like, this is great. I need some people to talk to, because my coworkers, they're not trying to get into the word, oddly enough. These pastors don't want to read scripture. So I'm like, maybe I could hop into this study. I don't have any community out here. And they're like, yeah. And as they're talking about their study, they're like, yeah, but Jamal, he adds an interesting dynamic to the study. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, he's asking questions that nobody really has an answer to or wants to look into. So I'm like, okay, that's my guy. Like, and I remember walking up to him and I was like, hey, is Judas in heaven or hell? Like, help me. I got nothing. And he looks at me and he goes, let's meet up. Let's go grab some food. And so I'm grateful because for every Friday for about 3 or 4 months, I met with Jamal at Corner Bakery, and he just asked me questions about my questions.
Yeah.
Never gave me a single answer, and he entertained it. And it was such a beautiful thing because within the Christian world, it's a bubble. Nobody's asking these questions.
Right.
So there's no one to bounce this off to. There's no dialogue. No one. Everybody is thinking exactly the same thing, which makes it a beautiful place if that's all you want. It's a horrible place if you're seeking truth because you'll never catch opposition. And so I was really grateful for those conversations with Jamal because at the very least, it was somebody that listened to me and that validated, like, oh no, I'm not crazy. I'm just seeking truth. I didn't even know what that meant. I'm thinking like, oh, this is it. He's the way, the truth, and the life. But like, I realized I wasn't following the way, truth, and life. And so fast forward, like being with Jamal and Angela, like my wife said, we were able to participate in Day of Atonement for the first time, and they never presented anything. They never forced anything onto us. They just presented it by the way that they modeled it out, and we just had great dialogues and great conversations. And I'm one of those people too that, like, if I see it, I can't unsee it, and I'm never going to argue with the book. Yeah, I'm like, it's ingrained. So after I'm reading something, and he's like, well, have you ever considered this? And I'm like, I can't do this. And so obviously this is the fall of 2019. Christmas is coming. We're in holiday season. I'm sweating bullets. I look like somebody fresh out of rehab. I'm struggling. I'm trying to keep it together. I'm in youth ministry. I got a Santa costume on. I'm singing the carols.
Oh my God.
I got videos. I'm serious. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. And the whole time I'm in the back of my mind like, this is demonic. This has got nothing to do with him. This is pagan. This is awful. And then you hear people talk about it and they know it's pagan, but then they'll say, oh, God redeemed it. I've never seen him redeem. I'm like, help me. Where is that in the book? What verse? What is that? What chapter is that in? Drive me crazy. Yeah. I make it through Christmas. My heart, I feel like I got beat up. I feel like I committed murder and got away with it. Like I feel so sick. And my wife will tell you, I'm struggling. I can't sleep every night. I don't want to go to work because I know what I'm doing isn't right. I'm trying to dodge people. I don't want to talk about it. No Christmas trees up in my house. I'm not doing none of that. And so then it gets to a point where I'm like, I need to leave. Like, I can't be here. Nobody wants to answer my questions. No one wants to have a dialogue. And I'm realizing everything here is built and exists for itself. It has nothing to do with the Father. And so then Easter's coming. And I'm like, I can't make it through Easter. I barely made it out of Christmas. My heart will give out. I can't stay here. And so COVID hit, and I was like, thank you, Father. He canceled Easter for us. And with that being said, I was like, I can't stay here another day. I didn't have a backup plan. I was trying to see if I can find something out. I mean, maybe I can go into real estate because, like I told you, you can't switch. And that's the hard part for most people. They stay in it because it's comfortable. It pays your bills. It's like you said, we got to keep this up. This is who I am. I've established my identity, my brand. My Christian career is taking off. Like, I'm ready for big leagues. I'm asked to be a pastor. Like, and so this is a horrible time to be coming in the truth. Very inconvenient. So with that being said, I knew that, like, I'll do better when I don't give myself options. So I quit my job. We got married on Thursday. Quit my job on like a Friday. Oh, no. And we had no backup plan, and I was unemployed. Both of us didn't work for like five months. Nothing, living off nothing. Faith and hope and love.
And God provided, didn't he? He
provided. And the beautiful part about it was we had nothing to do other than to look in the Word and figure out what it really says.
It's so simple. It's right there.
Man.
It's right there. Did you ever go through the book and be like, when did that get there?
Absolutely.
That wasn't there when I looked before, but you didn't really look before.
I was struggling. Even with Sabbath, when we started implementing Sabbath, like out of the 10, it's top 5. It's number 4. Yeah. I was like, you skip over it.
And it doesn't say it can be any day of the week either. It says the 7th day.
Yes.
Yeah. It's right there.
And then I think another thing that was huge was coming out of Christianity, not just like running towards the truth, but also seeing all the lies that have been there the whole time. And I think the worst part is how much I contributed to it. How much I was preaching this stuff. I'm got people believing this stuff, jumping up and down, throwing their money in the bucket, coming by. Like, I was doing a great job at selling false hope, and to me, it was the worst feeling in the world. And so it also made me, and you know, adding in my father, like, it made me run into it. And so now that we're here at Sukkot, learning that, like, being in Christianity, it's a me-centered gospel. It's about yourself. And anything else, like all that Jewish stuff, like my wife was talking about, it's inconvenient for you, but it's because it's still about you. And that was one major shift that had to turn. Number two, that all of his commands, everything in the book, like if he's someone that I'm in love with, if this is a relationship that I have, if I'm his bride, like why wouldn't I at the very least honor and give some reverence to it? If my wife, like, if she says she likes flowers on Tuesdays, I don't have to get it. But why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I at least lean into it a little more? And so it also showed me that, you know, the age-old question, like, how do you love the Lord your God, your heart, mind, soul, and strength? I needed him to tell me how to love him. And this whole time, I was trying to make up what I think he'd like. And so coming into Torah, like, once those things start to click, you know, I couldn't unsee it. I was like, this makes complete sense. But for a while, I thought I was going crazy. And so we made a hard shift. We're here at Sukkot, and we walked away from everything over a year and a half. And, you know, we dropped everything quickly. And it's been tough. Our families rejected us. Like, it's been interesting. But I'm so grateful that I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. And I mean, that's all you could really ask for. And so, and it feels good to know what's in the other 3/4 of the book. Because you run out of sermons preaching New Testament. I was like, I did water walking like 5 times.
Yeah, you really do.
You run out of material if you only preach the New Testament.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful thing to see the foundations of everything that I believe that I've been taught, where it comes from, what it's about. And so, like, Torah, I feel like, was the huge missing piece that helped me understand and complete what did it mean for him to be my God and for us to be his people.
That's awesome. So what do you do now?
Now I'm in construction management. I'm in the construction industry.
Cool.
And I also I have like a kids show, because I worked with kids for so long in the church. So now I have like a kids Bible show. That's what it's called. It's on YouTube.
Cool.
And so trying to create kids content that teaches kids the whole book from front to back.
Awesome.
And so those are kind of the things that I'm excited about.
What's the name again?
The Kids Bible Show.
The Kids Bible Show.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
You can find it on YouTube. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, and with that being said, also Jamal and Angela, I know they weren't going to do it, but I'll give them a shameless plug. They also have materials and resources for kids. Their company's called Yah's Manna, YHMANNA, and it's kids tableware sets, biblical tableware sets with stories, and they also come with books from Bible Pathway Adventures, which please check that out, because it's super cool, and you can use them as an adult. I'll be honest and say, I eat out of my kids' tableware set every single day. Am I lying?
No.
Every single day. Oatmeal at 8 o'clock.
Awesome. So, resources, what do you guys like to listen to? Do you like Arthur Bailey?
Yeah.
Who are your favorites?
So Arthur Bailey was, I love listening to Arthur Bailey. 119 Ministries was huge for me.
Yep.
The Way documentary was huge. We watched that on Christmas. Great tradition.
Nice.
Those are the 2 big ones, I would say. Also, there's another teacher. His name's Divine Prospect. That's his name on YouTube, and he goes down a lot of Torah keeping resources, more in like the Hebrew Israelite territory. Yeah, I think that's it.
That's good. That's good.
And you know, he made a comment, Jody, and said it's been interesting, like the walk that he's taken. I don't think I've ever seen so many miracles. I don't know if you should call them miracles, but like things that just come through for him. Like when he quit his job at the mega church in Orange County, I couldn't believe it. And then, sure enough, there was money, there was supply. Like the Father provided.
Where
he
did
came
it come
over
from?
all the time. I mean, and then got this amazing paying job in construction management
with no construction experience.
with no construction experience. I mean, just if there's any couple that I've seen that has had things just happen, you're like, wait, what? It's been this couple. And so it's been really cool to watch. Like, even the day before we were to come here to Sukkot, their trailer, the people that they rented a trailer from, canceled.
Oh. Not just one, like 2, 3, 4 people canceled. We almost couldn't come to Sukkot.
And so a friend said, hey, I have a trailer, why don't you take it? And it's the biggest trailer here on this lot.
Oh my gosh.
But that shows you, like, that lets you know you're on the right track.
It does.
Like, because you can talk about faith, but until you put yourself in a position to where he has to come through, it's all talk.
It's such a faith builder.
For sure.
Isn't it? And
it's addictive.
Right?
It's addicting in the best way.
Yeah, it is. It's a faith builder. It's very uplifting, but then when you connect that, when you start reading the book and you realize this could not have come about by accident. There is no possible way that the Bible was written by human beings.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? There's no possible way that there is not a God in heaven that is orchestrating things and putting all this stuff together. As soon as you start reading it, like for real reading it, there it is. Yeah. There are no more questions. Like when we were in Christianity going, you know, really? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really? Did that really happen like that?
Yep.
I mean, come on. You know, no, there's no question anymore. There's no question.
Well,
it's
I mean,
amazing.
Something you just said that I feel like is huge. Like you talked about, like when you read the book, it comes alive and you understand it. But it only really resonates with you if you're trying to live it out.
Yeah.
It makes no sense unless you're trying to walk it out. You're like, well, why would he do that? Why would Elijah lay on his side and eat food over cooked poop? I'm not going in the lion's den. I pray 3 times a day. Let old boy go in the lion's den. I'm a veteran here. Until you start making those sacrifices or those things that you feel like the Father's asking you to do, then you get it. Yeah. And then you resonate. And then the stories, and you're like, man, I'm grateful for this. So I realize, like, I'm not the only one. And at the bottom of Hebrews 11, it talks about all the people who weren't honored in this life, but in the next one.
Oh my gosh.
Their blessings, like, it changes everything. Yeah. It completely. And so that was another big part with us. Like in that Way documentary, one of the things that jacked me up was when they said, if Christ is the best and perfect example of how to live our lives, why is that our lives look completely different than his?
Right?
He kept the Sabbath. He went to the feasts.
He did.
He did all of these things. And so if I'm trying to live my life like him, even as a Christian, if I'm trying to live my life like him, I literally have to do what he's doing. But it's not until you do what he's doing that you understand. The book actually you can resonate with it. Until then, you're just a fan. You're not actually on the field. You're not in the game yet. You're an observer. You're someone who's just...
All the sports alliteration here, those sports illusions. Sorry, the only sport I ever played well was badminton. And that was because I could actually reach the top of the net. You know what I'm saying?
Oh.
Anyway, yeah. Just, life is so incredible on this side of Torah. You know what I mean? And it seems so weird because, like, it's the law, right? It's the big, scary thing that they are always preaching against in church. So don't put yourself back under the law. But, man, it really, truly is freedom. In ways that just defy explanation. You guys, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much. I just had the best time. I'm sorry I'm keeping y'all from worship over there, but
this is worship.
This is it really is. Yeah. This is great. Thank you for listening to Walk Like a Hebrew. If you enjoy this program, please leave a review on our Facebook page or your podcast app. You can find links to the resources mentioned in this episode in the show notes by visiting the link tree in our Instagram bio and Facebook, or by visiting sheholdsforth.com. Walk Like a Hebrew is now a ministry of Roadside Ministries, a faith-based private membership organization. We can now offer tax receipts for donations made to Roadside Ministries on behalf of the podcast. Please email me at sheholdsforth@gmail.com for more information. There are many other ways to support Walk Like a Hebrew, including getting yourself some sweet Walk Like a Hebrew merchandise on eBay or Etsy, or subscribing to this show at podhero.com. As always, many, many thanks to Jack Lane for our music. May Yahovah bless you. We'll catch you next time.